when we can have a serious discussion about an injury or about something, we should. But we should do it with facts. For example, and just to finish thing off, Betty retired on June. I have not seen a comment from any fan saying I miss Betancourt. I hope he's okay, or try to find out what he's doing at the moment, etc. Without invading his private life.
Welcome to RugbyMed, the podcast where we tackle health, injury, and innovation in rugby. I'm Carlos, joined by my co-host António, and we are bringing you insights from the front line of rugby journalism and player welfare.
Today, we are thrilled to welcome Francisco Isaac, a veteran rugby journalist whose work spans from Fair Play, Rugby Europe, Rugby Pass, Talk Rugby Union. Francisco brings, as always, a unique perspective on how rugby media has evolved, especially in covering player welfare. Welcome to Rugby Med, Francisco.
Thank you for the invitation and for welcoming me and calling me a veteran already. So
Yeah.
I have lived to this day to be called a veteran in the
Uh,
world of rugby sports.
I think we can't deny that at the moment.
Yeah,
Myself and yourself, we are already veterans
The
on this field.
experience.
Yeah, experience. Maybe that's a bad thing. It means that people don't usually stay a long time in rugby in Portugal. But let us both change that.
yeah,
Say,
well, yeah, it's true. It's true. I think, and this is a small just detail. It's weird that for the well, the many decades that Portuguese rugby has, we have so little people outside that were former players that stuck with the sport, and it's. I hope we can change, or the whole environment can change because the progress cannot only be made by former players or former head coaches. It's made by physicians, by psychologists, by journalists, by writers, by videographers, by everybody. So let's go for it. So what's the task for today?
So let's dive into your experience covering rugby across different platforms. Um, how was the digital transformation affect rugby journalism, especially when it comes to the injury reporting?
Well, see, I started covering rugby seriously for like 10 years ago, 11, and things have, they shouldn't have changed so drastically and dramatically, but it changed. Nowadays, uh, fueled by interest by fans, and be it because of fantasy leagues or because fans are diehard fans in rugby normally, we unfortunately have a problem that we don't have those light-hearted fans that just come to watch a game or two and don't know most players, etc. Just love the sport. Nowadays, we have no fans or just die-hard fans that
yeah.
really love the sport. And for example, today, Midol reports that Samuel Marks might be out for the next couple of 3 to 4 months. And they did this because a lot of Bezier fans were asking, is he going to be recovered in time for the next game? Because we need him, and etc. And you could see that on social media in Bezier, mainly in Instagram or on Facebook, you had a lot of comments of people asking, "What about this guy? What about that guy? Is he blessé, which is injury in French?" So you can see that it changed because 10 years ago you got a guy injured and it will come out on the report on website if it came out, but and fans would not like spend 2 minutes on it. Okay, it's injured. We know nowadays the guy is injured. They want to know how uh,
Yeah.
how long he's going to be out, if he's recoverable, he can recover quickly. So sorry, and it changed. So nowadays it puts a lot of pressure not only on fans, on clubs, but I think the most pressure puts on the players because I've talking. Sorry for the already going for the long monologue, I've talked with some players and
Yeah.
they like the attention because they feel that the fans worry about them, but at the same time, they feel there's a lot of pressure for them to, or denying that they're injured, or simply saying, okay, after 2 months of rehabilitation, I'm coming back 1 month early than I should. And they do this because they feel a lot of pressure from everyone to come back to the pitch. This normally happens also, and I'm not naming coaches or staff, but also from the staff that says, okay, if you don't come back now, another guy can take your place, and then when the season ends, we might have to change your contract, or we might have to let you go. And I've seen stories in France and England and in New Zealand that are sad because players are pressured in a way that their injury has to be well taken care of, but at the same time quickly now because we cannot spend a lot of time waiting for you to come back.
Yeah, completely. There's a unique thing on your work that triggers me to ask you one question, which is you report on tier one competitions, on Pro D2, on Top 14, but also you also go into the emerging nations competitions, the less established ones. For example, the Dutch Championship, the German Championship, the Spanish Championship, or the Portuguese Championship, of course. Um, what changes in terms of getting the information? What changes in terms of being able to report injuries of the players, getting knowledge of what's going on with them? What are the kind of challenges that you face when you try to cover, for example, the Rugby Europe Championship, the Division d'Honneur, or the Pro D2? What changes there from your side?
So, for example, the Pro D2, and this also happens or mostly happens with top 14, but the Pro D2 has done this also these past like 5 seasons. Is before the week's match, they always give a report of the injured players and explain why they are injured. For example, Pedro Bentancur, which we now know it was because of concussions. They reported that he sustained a concussion, and they were taking their time to get him fit to action. So they explain week after week about the player. When you come down to the nation, our nations, so it's easier to say our emergent world nations. It depends on the country. For example, Portugal have done this with you, Antonio, for quite a bit, and it's not easy because now then depends on the players and the staff. So it's not easy to manage. But in other unions, go to Spain, they report the injuries. Okay, this player didn't come because he was injured, but they normally don't try to open that much because, for example, when a Spanish player that's playing in France can't come to the national team because the club pressure him to not come, they cannot state on the on the report because then you will start a discussion of, like, for example, they tried once that was like this player didn't come for not unknown reasons but for non undisclosed reasons, and this for fans is a trigger. Automatically it means if he's not injured, he didn't come, he didn't want to, or because the club didn't allow. So they stopped giving the reports because of that. It
Yeah.
just doesn't help. If it's a big injury, the report. Mario Picciardi will be out for the next 5 months due to a shoulder injury. He's got surgery, and do a big report about it, and that's final. But I think our nations who not relied, sorry, who were vastly amateurish in the staff, not talking about the players, I'm talking about the staff and the structure, nowadays are finally progressing towards professionalization with guys like you and Carlos in the structures, and a lot of people like Paixão with our video analysis in Portugal, for example. So you see, there's a professionalization within the structure, and that's important because that will help us progress. But we need those
Yeah.
for the media guys. It's not that big that we don't have it. For guys like me, for example, because I can get information from other media. But when you go, for example, to England, which they nowadays report what the dealings about Portugal and Spain and Romania and Georgia and so on, when they see that a player, like, I'll give you an example, like Becca Gorgaze was out for the Autumn Nation Series, because of a shoulder injury. You had a lot of media speculating why Becca Gorgat is not in, why he's out, etc. And because the German media didn't report the injury at time, this creates a lot of frustration because this type of media, like what's called T1 media, when they are interested on us, they need the information. And when we cannot give the information, even as journalists from the tier two world or imagination world, they get frustrated and stop like following us at all, because if we don't give them information that can help them build articles and build awareness and build an audience. And fortunately and unfortunately, nowadays sports is audience market, not audience targeted. So we need audience to sell, to keep wages, to keep progressing, to keep having the structures, and not only about having games and players doing their craft. When we don't deploy the right information, we can't help things progress. For I give you an example. I think a lot of people talk about this. When Nicolas Martin had to forfeit the game against South Africa to go back to Montpellier, I think the Portuguese union reported that he was not injured, simply went back to the club, and that fostered a lot of anger towards Montpellier. Not saying it was right or wrong. I think people can have criticism, and they have to know how to do it. So sometimes people fall down to just cursing, insulting, and that doesn't help. Not the clubs, not the players, not the managers, not the agents, not even you doctors, because sometimes I've seen people say, "Oh, the Portuguese
Yeah.
union doctors are don't want to tell the truth." It's not to tell the truth. Sometimes it's simply they can't
Yeah.
give information that is private, and I think there's a problem nowadays with journalism and social media. Is nothing is private.
Yeah.
Everything has to be told. Yeah, most things have, but other things don't. Like for political situation, for me, I think for the health, for the sake of the player, let the things run, and when in due time it will be reported why he had to retire, why he is not playing. And
Precisely.
fortunately, Oyonnax did the right thing with you
Yeah.
guys. And when was the moment after the season ended? Okay, Pedro is not going to be fit to play again. He's going to retire, etc. Done.
Francisco,
Precisely.
when covering sensitive topics like career-ending injuries or or serious concussions, how was your approach evolved over the years of your career?
Well, it's difficult because uh, I have an opinion about the concussion discourse. I think things dramatically positively changed
Okay.
when, well, from the HIA or from players' health habits, because we cannot compare the players of the last 5 or 6 years to the guys in the 90s or 80s, or even in the beginning of the 2000s. A lot of older players that I've played with or I known smoked and drink heavily. So their habits were horrible. And that helps. Well, I remember a guy that got concussed in the game, played the full 80 minutes, and after the game, smoked and drank like it was his final day on the earth. And that doesn't help. Nowadays, players are more health oriented. They are more careful with what thing happened. And I think even doctors, because of the not the settlements, but with the players coming with lawsuits against the unions and the clubs because of the concussions. I think doctors and staff instructors are more careful when a player gets concussed. Of
Yeah.
course, it still happens, bad cases, and I think, but that's in everything in life. Unfortunately, for example, we still have cases of racism nowadays, but it's much less, like compared to 30 years ago. So everything happens less, but still happens. And I think people should watch out for the bad cases, but we have to applaud the positive things, because nowadays it's more easy to report this type of things. We have to be careful how we talk about it. Example, for a long time, when the player bashed against another guy's head, it was a head knock. It's not a head knock; it's a concussion. Because a head knock, it's like not childish vocabulary, but it's like just a head knock. Okay, he just had knock. It's nothing that big. No, it's a concussion. Let's call things by they are, because a concussion is something that cannot be serious or, well, very, 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 very serious. And I think things progressed positively. I think doctors start working with journalists more nowadays and social media, trying to report things like they are. But unfortunately, I think fans get very frustrated with the bad examples and don't look to the good side of things. Because things progress. We have, I think, in 20 years we will have less players having concussions or retire due to concussions than we had like in the 90s or the 80s. Let's give you just an example. 2 days ago, I talked with a former player from the 70s, 80s, and he said, nowadays players with 28 years old, 29, retire due to health conditions. This shows that the sport has progressed in the wrong way. And I said, no, it's completely the opposite, because the players go to the doctor, and the doctor are serious today. You cannot play at this level because you have a serious injury, you have serious concussion, you cannot continue to play, or you'll have dementia in 20 years or 10
Yeah.
years, you'll have
Yeah.
problems, a lot of things. So
Exactly.
things progressed to a positive way. I think the problem with social media, just to finish the answer, is that we still like to focus too much on the boom moment. So high tackles to the head and everyone applauds. It's a great tackle. But when the player falls down to the pitch and it doesn't move, everyone gets like, oh my God, is he dead? Is he okay?
Yeah.
We cannot transition from a moment of applause because a high tackle and then a moment of shock because the player is not moving. Fans have to tone down a lot and start to get more informed about it, because nowadays they can talk with the guys like you, Antonio, Carlos, about it. It's not like 20 years ago that you saw the team's doctor name, but you didn't know who he was or how to protect him. You have social media. If you are a person that's not going to insult, just ask why this player has this. Maybe the doctors will answer, and you'll find out good information about it.
Yeah, I think that our game has evolved significantly in many aspects. There is still a good way to go, but things are getting better, as is exactly as you said. And when we see a player at the age of 28, 29 make the sensible decision of stopping playing at the highest level, like the examples that you have given from players that are so dear to us. I think that unlike what the old schoolers might say, it's actually something really positive on the game. It shows that we are taking care of the players and that we are making sure that they will live happy, long lives in good health. So, Carlos, I don't know if you want to pick from here now.
Yeah, I think we will need to change a little bit here the segment here. Let's talk about the media's role in promoting player welfare. How do you balance comprehensive reporting
Mhm.
with medical privacy? What do you think about it?
Well, I'll give you the example. I wrote an article about depression in Rugby, and it was a very hard subject for me, because at some point I start to feel a little. Well, I'm not saying it's a joke, but depressed, because the stories you hear from players are not easy to accept. Though some stories are just normal things that you heard from the past, but others are not. Are things that you hear only in movies or in very horrible movies. So, and when I wrote the article, I couldn't fully disclose some of the names and some of the information, because the players asked me to protect their identity and also to protect how their example they gave to me. I could tell the general traces of the case, but I couldn't tell the particular of it, because, well, a very interested fan would find out, like, not quickly, but will do some searching, and would find out the club, the player, and what was all the whole subject. And when writing that article, I had to balance between I wanted to give information to fans that we should treat those players better, not only to fans, also to staff, because you had stories of players saying the way that head coaches treated them. Like there's one of the stories that he was being treated by a physician in the club, and the head coach just stormed inside the physician's room and start shouting, "You have to go to the pitch. After 2 months injured, it stops now, or you're going to get fired." And of course, for mental health, and this is not good for a player because he goes home and a lot of thoughts just starts bump inside of her head, and this happens in the men's a women's game.
Yeah.
uh,
But
and so when reporting this story, I had to be careful in the way that I wrote it, in the way, and I showed to the players. So this is a way of how I do journalism. Before I push publish or push send to my editor so he can give it a final check, I always show to the players. So I
yeah,
can so there was no information that they didn't want to pass to the public. That and that's important. And I think the story broke within fans because they read it down and they understood the assignment. We have to look better for the players. We have to find solutions for them. We have to find a different way to criticize them. And in the World Cup, I'm not naming names, but some Portuguese players were targeted by Portuguese fans who
yeah,
had well, it's not wasn't even anonymous fans, were people with Instagram accounts, family Instagram accounts, uh, like share threatening players' lives. And I think this can retire a player at some point. It can push the player towards suicide or other worse cases. And I think we should we should always think about how the other one feels, because a player doesn't miss a tackle because he wants to. He missed a tackle because it was a case of did misjudgment. He was not on time. Whatever. He didn't do it on purpose,
yeah.
and people have to stop thinking like this.
Sure. That's an important and growing part of the game that we need to take care, which is the social media impact on the players. But as you said before, on the mental health aspect of the our players, and your article was really interesting and I think brought up to everyone's knowledge that things are changing and that the players are becoming more open to share their own experiences and to communicate their struggles and their fears with their at least with their medics and that's I think it's a good step. I think we will all agree on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think at least with the physicians and well the masseurs or whatever, the players are more prone to talk,
Yeah,
more to be honest, to be open. I think with head coach, not assistant staff, but with the head coach, they're still afraid to be open because we still have a mentality of macho man of the head coach that has to be mean, big, whatever. It doesn't have to be like that. They have a job to do, but the way some people treat players sometimes push them to their worst, to not give it all, um, or in some cases simply they stop caring about the profession at all. They go to training, go to games, but as I talked with like four of the players told me, when I get to 34, I'll retire, and I don't want to hear a word about rugby
not really even
until
anymore.
until the day I die. And you don't want this from the players. You don't
Yeah,
at
for
all,
sure, for sure,
at all.
for sure, for sure.
And Francisco, in your experience, how do different rugby cultures, because we live in a world that is very different from the four corners of the world, and these different rugby cultures, how they approach the discussion of player welfare from the perspective of journalism.
Well, that's a very big question and a difficult one. For example, I think, and I'm not again naming names or targeting a culture. But for example, it seems that in the Pacific Isles, sometimes physical abuse to the partners is like it's something that happens. And when you get to Europe or France, normally that nowadays have woke finally to the case of abuse and rape more. When these players like push their wives against the wall or something, and the French immediately act. They get arrested, like what happened in November to 2 or 3 players, and they get reported. And normally, journalism is direct on it. Said player did this, and etc. etc. This sometimes creates the feeling for some of these cultures to not be so open about it with journalists and be afraid of talking with them. Okay. And this is a problem. When we talk with, so that's why when we do interviews or try to highlight a player, we have to be careful who is the player. We have to find out. And nowadays, there's no way that you don't know what a player did in the past, because if you try to find any information, you will find it online, or some coach, some player will tell you. But for example, when you talk with the South Africans, and I think this is important because they are progressing towards a new type of era in rugby, not in sports, but no, mainly in rugby. They're very open when they are not happy, when something happens, and when when a colleague of them does something that it's not right, they normally say to their faces, and this is changing the culture inside rugby. I think it's massively changed, and this explains why we have nowadays so much interview so many sorry so many interviews with Springboks players, because they are very open to talk with journalists. They don't want to hide anything. But when you go to Fiji or Samoa, you have less, and also the English barrier is complicated. They speak English, but sometimes they're afraid of their English not being comprehensible enough for guys in Europe, because well, French media sometimes take things out of context and I think that's one thing that for me it's important for player welfare is when they're going to talk with the media, they should be prepared to talk with the media.
Yeah.
Okay. For example, if they're going to talk about an injury, I think they should talk with their union physician or club physician about what they can say about that injury. It's important because there are details about the way that he was treated, or the way it happened, whatever, that he shouldn't tell to the media or to the fans, because it can create some type of discourse that is not valuable to anyone, but to the horrible discuss of creating like a big monster of a head coach that put a player on the field. Maybe he put a guy in the field because he didn't know the guy was injured, because a player hid the injury. So that for me, it's important nowadays with player welfare and the way we report in the media, that players can prepare to us to talk about it. That's why when I do in my interviews, I say to them, please, before you give me an answer, think what you're saying, okay? Because I'm not going to report everything you're going to say. I'm going to show it to you. It's important because when you're going to read the full interview, so you don't get shocked. I said this. I shouldn't have said this, because this can help create some type of bad discourse, and we want all to avoid this.
Yeah, it's previous briefing. Everyone should be
Yeah.
briefed. Yeah, and that's actually I'm gonna pick from there, and I'm gonna ask you one thing, and we're about to wrap it up. So, but before we end, if you can bear with us, 2 more questions. The first one would be, as you know, we have several trial laws in place. Well, we do have several programs within World Rugby to try to promote player welfare. Do you think that these trials and these actions have been well put onto the people that are the target of these interventions, which are the vast audience of people that follow rugby? And has that been effective? And in your opinion, what could have been done differently? And how can we still correct any mistake in terms of communication of the trial laws and some of the actions, the preventive actions in terms of player welfare that we have put on recently?
So some of the laws I don't like it, but it's not a good discussion to have here. But I think the way that some of the new law variations were introduced were not in the best way. You had introduced in some countries, and in the others you didn't. Then you
Yeah.
had introduced in England, but not introduced in Ireland. Then you go to the Champions Cup, and well, those laws are not if on effect, but the teams in England already practicing and playing with those rules in their competition, and it creates here. The idea is to speed up the game. The game for me is already too much accelerated. You compare it to the 90s or the 80s, and it's completely different type of rugby. So it's quick, and sometimes I think more quick or more to play it more quickly will not help players' welfare because it will put more pressure to the bodies, will put more pressure, will create more concussions because well, more speed can create more a type of flash that's not good, etc. But the problem is the way that was explained. For example, I don't know if in Portugal we adopted all the variations of the laws. And
Not
if
all.
you go,
Yeah.
you see, exactly. But if you go to a French fan in France that likes Thomas Appleton and wants to follow Kudul's Thomas Appleton, does he know that we didn't, that the Portuguese Premiership didn't adopt said rule? He doesn't. And this doesn't happen in futsal, in football, in volleyball, in basketball, in handball because they don't do this. They have their laws and it's final. When you change to everyone. You start Rabies normally did this with the under 20s, experimented with the under 20s, and then it will be if it worked out, implement worldwide. But nowadays you implement in Super Rugby Pacific because they want to play uh, almost Rugby League, but with rucks and scrums, which is insane, but it's their option. But you go to France, where you have Toulouse in top 14, and you didn't have like the uncontested lineout. For a long time, the 50-22 was a different type of 50-22, and this causes a massive confusion to die-hard fans. Now go to the light-hearted fan that just jumped in to watch a rugby game because of Antoine Dupont because he likes Antoine Dupont, and gets completely confused. And when he asks, "Okay, can you explain this law to me?" and the die-hard fan looks to him, "Well, I think we changed this law last year, so." And this for the occasionally rugby fan doesn't help him to get interest on the sport because what sells in the sport nowadays is the games, of course, but also the atmosphere that's in the stadium and the stories that the players have to tell, not only the players but also the staff and so on. And if you can provide these free things or two of these free items, you won't have a, a big audience, and that will, on the long run, kill the sport. And I think that's a problem that we should look for. And when you talk with players, even from the standpoint of the player welfare, some of them told me, when you go to Ireland, a high tackle is interpreted in this way. But you go to France, it's completely different because it's 5 centimeters lower. And this it's complete disconnection because it creates on the players a confusion of how I have to tackle, how I have to be lower, how I have to enter in the ruck, how I have to do, etc., etc., etc. And I find like just a small thing. It's for example croc rolls, which is for me a killer move in rugby. It has ended players' careers. I've seen one of the guys of Tel Aviv Heat in Lisbon get his Ronaldo Bothma, his career ended that day because of a croc roll from a Portuguese player, but it happened, and we have to ban it. But even when you see it, match officials don't know when it's a croc roll or when it isn't because it's not well specified by World Rugby or by the unions because sometimes World Rugby gives the laws and ideas and the unions simply don't want to follow it because well I don't feel like it doesn't work like that, and that's why I think football still is several steps ahead because when there's a new implementation of a law, every union has to impose it on their league. No discussion about it. You have to impose it, and that's that. For example, well, the last law variation in football was the replacement bench. Now you can have 5 replacements. In some games, you can have 7 if it goes over time. I'm from the time it was 2. Now it was 3. Now it's 5 or can be 7. And you could see that every league imposed that rule. While in rugby you have some playing like this, others like that, and it doesn't help anyone. Especially it doesn't help players, and in the long run doesn't help guys like you. When a guy gets injured by a concussion, that in another country wouldn't be a red card or even a yellow card.
Thank you, Francisco, and thank you for your platform to bridge that gap that you were talking about from between the medicals and the rugby community. I think is the way to inform the people, to inform the fans, to stay more connected, to stay more close to the fans. Because sometimes for us as a medical doctors is difficult not to teach only the players or the staff about some medical conditions, but also with the fans that are the important one of the important part of the game. So to wrap it up, do you have any final thoughts about the link between journalism or media and the medical staff?
Yeah, I have a final thought. I think this is mostly to fans is when you have something critical to say it with facts and with common sense. Sometimes we have fans doing snarky comments or just straight insulting, and that doesn't help because look, you guys you don't have you can have PhDs, you have long years of work in the field, in hospitals, etc. You don't need someone to come here and say, Antonio Carlos, you are a disgrace because Torty was not fit to play. Like, please don't. And sometimes journalists allow this to happen because it fosters, that controversy. It's fun because it will generate more audience, and that's why I have a problem with today journalists on the new kids because they love like guys like Trump because it builds an audience, like rage-fueled audience, and the journalists, yeah, this is good for us. But at some point, the leopard is going to bite your face and they're going to rip your face off, and we're going to have a battle to fight. And when we can have a serious discussion about an injury or about something, we should. But we should do it with facts. For example, and just to finish thing off, Betty retired on June. I have not seen a comment from any fan saying I miss Betancourt. I hope he's okay, or try to find out what he's doing at the moment, etc. Without invading his private life, because we don't want to be invaded, but to care about them. And this is my problem with fans. You have to worry about the player welfare, not until the day his last day on the pitch, but after that, because they'll be forever a Portuguese international player or a direct player. He wore the jersey, played for the Premiership 1 or 2 games, or 10 or 20 or 100, 200, whatever. You have to worry with them in a positive way because someday he commits suicide or something, and then you get shocked and why? Well, because maybe he wasn't cared after that said retirement because no one paid attention to him. And when I did that article about the depression, the players that committed suicide mostly was because they thought that no one cared about them. No one wanted to hear about them. And sometimes they went to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and it was not enough because they thought that they had done badly on the pitch, and then fans hated them, and they didn't. They have no use to life. So it's better for me to finish. And if people think it's weak men and weak women that does this, it isn't. The some of the stories are the strongest people I have like known, but it's so easy to touch in the bad part of our brains. It's so easy because you start to eat and drink from the bad feelings and the worst type of feelings, and you just go, go, go. And when they say, okay, if I just jump from the bridge, it's done, and they jump and it's over.
Yeah.
For them it's number, but for the others that stay, it will forever be a shock. So for my final message is fans to be better, and for journalists to be also be better. We don't need certain type of journalism. Sensationalism has to stop at some point.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you so much for this powerful message with which we finalize our talk. It has been a huge pleasure to have you here as usual. It is for sure really important that everyone focus on becoming better persons, and with that we'll become better doctors, better journalists, better media, better fans. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for accepting our request to have you here. And it has been a pleasure. I'm António Cruz Ferreira.
And I'm Carlos Braga. Make sure you'll follow us on Instagram, Spotify, and Facebook, and also on YouTube. And stay connected for more RugbyMed news.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you.